Today, we're going to be talking about Huntdown. Not Hunt Showdown, Hunt Down. Hunt Down.
Hunt Down.
All in one word, got it? Good. Huntdown was released on the Epic Game Store and 8th gen consoles back in May of 2020. It would later be ported to Steam a year later. From the start, it looked like a great run-and-gun title, and damn it, perhaps due to my own ignorance, I did not play this game until June of 2022. I definitely saw this trailer in passing and was intrigued, but didn't commit to actually making a purchase. In fact, I didn't even buy the game. A post-launch review code was given to me by one of the developers just a number of months ago. We'll talk more about that later. Huntdown is a cool run-and-gun game that definitely takes inspiration from some of the most classic titles, but undeniably marches to the beat of its own drum as a whole experience. You can only aim horizontally, so getting some leverage in that regard means you have to duck or jump. Each character has their own unique weapon and special attack. Goons use all sorts of guns and melee weapons against you, and many can be attained by you to retaliate.
Now this is a gun!
Besides what the bosses use, since it's mainly what makes for their unique encounters. Of course, your defense options are just as important. On hard mode, the only mode I played this game on from beginning to end, you've got 3 hit points. Health ups tend to be aplenty, and the checkpoints are more than fair.
If you don't have insurance, don't show up!
But it still pays to be careful and avoid attacks, especially against the bigger threats. Besides jumping and ducking, you can slide under bullets as well as hide behind boxes or within doorways. There's also the revival mechanic only available in co-op mode, but it leaves you open for a good while, so you always gotta be wary of your surroundings.
Help me help you.
I also think the runaway stash mechanic is fun. You get put on a chase so quickly, throwing yourself into danger just to find one of these eluding Pulp Fiction-y suitcases full of God knows what.
Stash collected.
I also mostly played this game in co-op with a couple friends. Single player has its own kind of challenge, but I actually found co-op to be a lot more fun, and it almost feels like they designed the game with that in mind. The reviving factor, while not new to co-op games, is less common in the run-and-gun field, and it adds an entirely new angle to how you should approach enemies and their oncoming projectiles. In fact, the reviving mechanic itself makes co-op feel a lot more cooperative than the likes of Contra or Metal Slug, where sure, you got someone who can protect you from other enemies at times, but you don't have any real way to interact with each other, never mind reviving. The way Huntdown's cooperative gameplay is designed made me really happy I experienced it for the first time this way, especially as someone that doesn't really play co-op games anymore. Why that's the case is, frankly, a story we can perhaps dive into another time. So that's the gameplay. It's as in-depth as it needs to be without being bloated. Just like the best run-and-gun games out there, your character is as strong and capable at the end of this campaign as they were from the very beginning. All you can do to make progress is to learn the game and hone your skills. There's no mind-testing strategy, no level-up system, nothing like that. It's about as pick up and play as all the guns you blast out of enemies' hands. Go for that sawed-off and make some face paste.
How do you like your new haircut?
Or go for the melee weapon and pry those cowards out of their doorways.
Killing time!
Predictable.
Using just about all the weapons feels insanely good.
Target eliminated.
But what about everything else? I certainly don't want to just glaze over this game and gush about cool 80s references and cyberpunk aesthetic like nearly every other reviewer I've seen for this game. I'm not going to get too mean here, besides saying it almost feels intellectually dishonest for a reviewer to judge a game when they don't even try grasping its most basic mechanics. A lot of games don't look very enticing when demonstrations fail to show how it's meant to be played. But that's fine, it's kind of what motivated me even more so to make this video. Besides people gushing over the surface level aesthetic, the game's presentation and incredibly dense style went by mostly unnoticed in the review sphere. The story has a pretty typical dystopian action setting, a future where society's free fall into ruin is being fueled by capitalist greed. Is that better? Just saying greed? It's totally something different, right?
Profiteering mega corporations provide protection and jobs to anyone who abides by their policies.
Gangs rose up to fight against mega corporations trying to keep their societies in line. They said no to the authority trying to tell them what to do. Of course, a team of 3 mercenaries take on the job to put some of the biggest gangs down.
But there are some that have no interest in gang affiliations nor company citizenship. They only pledge allegiance to the highest bidder.
While not affiliated with the mega corporations, they'll gladly accept their cash. Wolfmother communicates with you and lays out your missions.
Welcome back. It has been a long time since the company acquired your services. So once again, you were personally selected for the job. We trust you are willing to accept.
Got nothing better to do, Ms. Rose?
I had a feeling you'd say that. A mother knows her children.
A lot of your targets are in the field of pure crime and psychopathy, and... Wait, that's just a cop. Look at this description. This is literally just like a typical cop. Although, some of them start to lean more towards behavior this corporation simply doesn't approve of. Sometimes their descriptions kind of tell me they need help rather than a bullet to the head. But sometimes they're just pure evil. Here, I'll talk a bit more about the story, and throughout this section, I'll be accompanied by the game's writer, whom I recently had the pleasure to speak with and ask some questions.
My name is Adrian Comeau. I am a writer as well as a community manager, and I provided script work, localization, naturalization, scenario writing, a bunch of other miscellaneous advertising and whatnot for Easy Trigger games and for Huntdown.
During my talk with Adrian, he told me a little bit of his background and what he did before joining Easy Trigger Games. He's an artist, an actor, a cat lover, a writer, and all-around cool as hell dude. Before Huntdown, he wrote a novella called Rotary, which depicted a story between a man and a woman in a relationship that's complicated to say the least. It flipped perspectives between the characters often, and neither were given names or even specific facial features, which I thought was really cool. You can essentially imagine what they looked like, and nothing in the novella would contradict your imagery, so long as it was the basic details. Anyway, Rotary is about this couple that keeps splitting and finding each other at various points of their lives, but the woman has a lot of strange things happening to her, like internally. An inner voice craving for flesh, a monstrous entity unsheathing from her body at times, while the man is none the wiser. It really blends very human situations with completely paranormal events. It's like nothing I've ever read before.
It started as a collection of short stories before it was a cohesive story, and they were actually biographical, autobiographical. So then what I did was I just realized that with a couple slight tweaks, I could actually turn it into like a consistent narrative. My brother's actually quite a well-known writer. His name's Joey Comeau, and he did a webcomic called The Softer Worlds, which to this day, he stopped doing it like 10 years ago. He still gets over like 10 million hits a week on his website. So I just decided that I would sort of try my hand at it. Like, I've always been interested in writing and I've always written, but I've typically have been much more of a visual artist. I just wanted to like challenge myself. So from the outset, I was like, I wonder if I can write a cohesive story without using names and without actually defining location or like place. So without naming anything, but you would still be like 100% aware of who is being talked about, and you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't get confused. One of the ways I can differentiate these two characters and their like side-by-side narrative is to have one in first person singular and one in third person. So you're always aware of who you're following at what time. When I approach writing, you sort of decide on the emotion that you want to get people to feel first and foremost, like before I even really think about what exactly I want to say or like who I want to say it about. And then it's about, well, how can you attain that? And that's why I tried short stories, because I find with short stories, it's a lot easier to get that really simple idea, and you can capture somebody's like an emotion. You can sort of make them sad or a little melancholy or make them kind of laugh out loud.
So, Adrian pitched his writing chops with this little story he wrote, and it was enough to convince the devs to bring him on board to write the characters. I like to think how he wrote the unnamed lovers and their little nuances are what the director and designer of Huntdown, Tommy Gustafsson, wanted for these mercs and goons.
I made a pitch to them because at that point they were working under that like Square Enix thing, where Square Enix was just sort of like picking out these these indie games and kind of giving them a boost, a slight financial boost to like, you know, help them get it done, but also to help with like marketing and stuff like that. So the framework for the game existed already, and I saw it and I was just like, all right, that's dope. I'd already worked on a couple smaller games and I really enjoy script writing for games. So I just kind of cold called them. I emailed them and I was like, here's my body of work. It's like obvious from the little bit that I've seen that English is not the first language like among your sort of development staff. And I was like, I'm a writer, but also I've done a lot of work with like localization and naturalization of scripts, like having lived in Tokyo and having lived in Seoul. So if you would like some assistance with that, I'd be happy to do it. So they took a look at my stuff. Tommy read my book and they were happy to have me on. I did like a small like sample script for them and they were just like sold. And then it was several years of script writing later, the game finally came out.
Something you'll come to see is that this world is incredibly dense, regardless of how simple the overarching plot is. Violent gangs from different walks of life are reigning over this town. The hoodlum dolls, the misconducts, the heat seekers, and the number one suspects.
With sufficient thrust, pigs fly just fine.
Let's light up the place a little, boys.
Start up those engines, you worthless pieces of shit!
If pain is money, you're about to become the richest man alive.
In the wake of this dystopia, they've taken charge of multiple districts, and you're hired in order to take them down. Wolfmother, the assumed CEO of a mega corporation, seeked out these bounty hunters for assistance in taking down these gangs for good. She's the one in charge, she's the one directing you what to do and who to hunt. I asked Adrian to explain a bit more on her name as well as her knitting behavior.
I think with her specifically, we pulled a lot from European mythology and a lot from like European sort of like semiotics, like symbolism. So I do believe that she is almost exactly what you said, maybe not controlling like the world or like everything that you see around you, but she's definitely supposed to come across as controlling element for the characters that you're playing as anyway. She's a tough one to describe. There's a lot of things that we pulled from for her, and there's like two separate Norse myths that are related to wolves. One of them's like somehow like she's like the goddess or the daughter of a goddess, and it's supposed to be like a symbol of power. And then I think there's the much more well-known, like, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Fenrir. Do you know that myth, the like wolf? I quite enjoy Norse mythology, but I would say that my expertise and like the stuff that I do know about is probably a lot more like native mythology as well as like Asian mythology. Because while I was living there, I made it a point to pick up a lot of their mythology just because I'm like super fascinated by that kind of stuff. Like creation myths especially, I find to be really neat. So yeah, so that it's just more like semiotics, right? Like, you know, the idea of like without words trying to convey various ideas. And there's a lot of like communication going on throughout the game, like subtle semiotic ideas that where it falls apart a little bit is because like a lot of it is very catered to like Europeans because it's made by Europeans. But then like I did my best to also try to put in like a lot of like semiotic communication, like when and where I could make suggestions or within the dialogue. But there is a bit of a divide between the script and then the imagery of like the type of symbolism that we're using.
It truly is a tale of two or more cities. Of course, throughout the campaign, you're mowing, Anna-ing, and John-ing your way through all these gangs, these hoodlums, goons, and ruffians that commandeer districts, filling the town with pure explosive anarchy. Your wave of bloody justice, or at least what these characters probably consider justice, rains upon these fools in side-scrolling, gun-toting, ballistic action.
Keeping a low profile ain't my style.
Blow your mind. You got hit by the best.
Operating at optimal levels.
But why are they doing what they're doing? What is the end goal for them? Well, for the bounty hunters, to get paid. Although it doesn't look like they even got that.
My child, you have exceeded all expectations. Sadly, I have some unfortunate news for you. You were never supposed to make it out alive. I hate you. You see, the company is under new management, and our recent directives have been to take over more territories and eliminate all possible evidence of our involvement.
Bitch, you still owe me.
Pay up or I'll hunt you down.
For Wolf Mother and her corporation though, absolute control. Unlike many action films of yesteryear, Huntdown is a lot more upfront with letting you know this isn't so black and white. The gray areas are a lot more obvious in the setting, and it doesn't require much analysis compared to, say, RoboCop. And that's what's crazy about this game and how much Adrian provided for the story and dialogue. For a run-and-gun game, it has an extremely surprising amount of writing put into it. The developers went the extra mile in every way possible, and the script is no exception. Even their interactions with Wolf Mother are unique to each other.
So once again, you were personally selected for the job. We trust you are willing to accept.
Affirmative. We are willing to accept, Miss Rose.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
Yes, of course, Miss Rose.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
Got nothing better to do, Ms. Rose.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
It's cool. The story itself is simple and nuanced at the same time. Huntdown is a pretty basic and easy to understand lesson on unlikable characters and gray areas in the world of protagonists. And don't misconstrue what I mean when I say unlikable. John Sawyer, Anaconda, Mo-Man, they're fun and charming in their own right. But where their hearts lie and what they're doing in this world is morally bankrupt. They're not really characters you can look up to, and they're certainly not ones you can relate to. Well, maybe in some ways.
I hate cops.
What I'm trying to say is none of this really detracts from how fun they are as characters.
Me and Tommy, he had a lot of ideas about the world as it exists, and then we use that as a jumping off point for the type of people that occupy that world. You could see a lot of obvious inspiration from Judge Dredd and RoboCop, and there's no such thing as an actual hero. There's plenty of anti-heroes though. There's plenty of people where if put in the position and given some incentive like money, might do the right thing. And I think that the reason why we wanted to go for that is because it's just a more engaging type of world and types of characters to write, is these morally ambiguous characters. People that you're playing as aren't necessarily any better than the people that you're sort of fighting as you go through. You know what they're doing, what the sort of bad guy's plan is throughout the game, but a lot of the people that you're killing, they're just doing what you're doing. They're just hired guns, right? So, at the end of the day, are you really better than them because you're working for this nice old lady who likes to knit? Maybe, maybe not. And we leave that sort of a bit ambiguous too, right?
Of course, ending the game doesn't exactly tie matters into a neat bow.
How is it possible?
I've been hunting down tougher sons of bitches than you, boy.
You think your fight ends with me, bounty hunter? Look carefully at your employers. We have more in common than you think.
Sing it out, shithead.
As the defeated Shogun says, nothing ends with him. And he forewarns you can't trust the ones that put you up to this.
This means that your employment is, unfortunately, terminated. And a bounty is now being placed on your head. And it seems my head as well.
A double cross happens near the end, but this matter's apprehended as a double crosser gets double crossed. Triple crossed?
And I believe my retirement from this company is imminent. A contract is still a contract.
As the narrator describes, this world is nothing more than a snake eating itself.
And as long as there is a hunter, there will always be a hunt down.
I really enjoyed the characterizations displayed in Huntdown and wouldn't mind this attention to detail in other run-and-gun games. It makes the characters more charming and can even boost replay value.
And I thought I was having a bad day.
Well, this looks like a lot of paperwork.
A decoration of death. Hello, goodbye.
I'm king of the hill.
Heads up below!
It's really cool and helps flesh out this world so much more. And it's done in a tasteful way where the characters aren't spouting some catchphrase every few seconds.
They call us Deathbringer.
Nap time's over.
Now you're just playing hard to get.
So, Huntdown's core design really got me thinking. It's a side-scrolling shooter, right? Some would call it a run-and-gun game. Of course, you don't always run while you gun. It's just a catchy little phrase for a different type of side-scrolling shooter, as there are multiple. A spaceship, for example, doesn't run, so Gradius isn't a run-and-gun. Nobody calls it that, despite that it's a game where you shoot many enemies as the screen scrolls to the right side. A side-scrolling shooter. So what is it? These kinds of games are referred to as shoot-em-ups, or shmups. Shmups and run-and-guns are almost subgenres of a subgenre. But what runs? Mammals, humans, people, men. Big, muscular men trot across the screen with their almost as big projectile weapons. Run, gun. They can run and gun. So here's Huntdown. You indeed run and gun. All of the most famous run-and-gun games play at least a little differently from each other, and what separates Huntdown's run-and-gun gameplay from the biggest classics? The mechanic of actively hiding behind boxes and inside doorways, and this really got my brain tingling. This kind of mechanic dates back to decades ago. Arcade game Rolling Thunder, made by Namco back in 1986, had a mechanic similar to this, albeit much less reliable. There was also an on-rails shooter series for arcades similar to it called Time Crisis, also by Namco in 1995, which some argue is an evolution of Rolling Thunder's core design.
There he is! Gotcha! Action!
I know this is going to seem like I'm going even further off the rails, but I want to get everyone on the same page here. I also freaking love Time Crisis, and no, I already said this isn't the time. So, Rolling Thunder really emphasized on ducking behind obstacles in order to avoid enemy fire, as a single shot can kill you. So it isn't surprising that Rolling Thunder is considered to be the progenitor to Time Crisis. Ducking behind crates while multicolored baddies with face-obscuring gear come after you with both projectile and melee means. It's Rolling Thunder in so many ways, just with a first-person perspective and on rails. Anyway, what am I getting at here? Were the developers of Time Crisis inspired by Rolling Thunder? Despite both being made under Namco teams, I don't particularly think so. The mechanic of actively hiding behind stuff to avoid enemy fire while also reloading your weapon could have been something that dawned on them after so many existing rail shooters gave you no means to defend yourself besides shooting first. However, I think it's still a great timeline to look at, to see how the core idea of shooting up bad guys evolved within these developers that were merely looking for a way to create more fun arcade games. What I'm getting at here is that the relation between Rolling Thunder and Time Crisis is apparent, despite the literal opposite dimensions and perspective these games bear. So, this all got me thinking. The mechanic of hiding in doorways and behind objects in Huntdown opened up a part of my mind I didn't consider regarding run-and-gun games. What was the game that felt like a true revolution to the run-and-gun subgenre that made its way into the third dimension of gaming? Some would say Neo Contra, but I can't really agree with that. Neo Contra's formula was already a part of the series before it, so bringing that overhead gameplay into the third dimension wasn't really a revolution in said genre. Of course, just like Rolling Thunder to Time Crisis, we need to look outside of the series to find a successor to Contra's spirit, and it took hours of Huntdown to make me realize what it was. Gears of War. I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but if you really break down Gears of War, it has so many parallels and similarities to Contra. Big guns held by even bigger, muscly men, little deviation of the main objective, which is to destroy what's ahead of your path, tearing down an otherworldly army in deteriorating cities and barren wastelands. While most of the enemies are easily killable fodder, you've got hulking beasts who serve as proper boss battles. Hell, the second game even has you fight your way through a giant gross pulsating organism. Look at this, how is this not Contra?
This is Private Phoenix. Lieutenant Kim is dead.
I can go on regarding how this game essentially mutated the Contra formula and created its own identity with it, but I suppose what's most important is what this game added that Contra didn't really utilize, and that's the cover mechanic. Something so many people mocked, despite being a fun and useful mechanic that would make a significant mark on third-person shooting action forever. Chest-high covers, corners, and doorways are Gears of War's somersault jumps, so to speak, the main way to avoid enemy fire. They're also the rawest reminder throughout Gears of War that this is a video game and a video game first. Yes, things about the environment make for convenient cover spots because it's a goddamn video game where you're expected to kill these inhuman foes before they kill you. Just like how these goons would have a much easier time killing you in Huntdown if you didn't have these crates, these doorways, these barrels. Huntdown is, in a way, expressing this invisible step, this invisible evolution, the missing link between Contra and Gears of War. Somewhere inside that gap is where Huntdown is supposed to be, thanks to this defense mechanic that helps connect these two games. Although, I'm getting ahead of myself. While Huntdown incidentally planted this seed in my brain, this isn't where their inspiration came from, according to the director. Tommy Gustafsson and Andreas Renberg got this idea from Alcatraz, an Amiga game that, I'll say it was ambitious at the time. Yep. But hey, I respect that they were able to take the core concept of this game and make something incredibly unique and satisfying to play. Still, it's fun to think of game design in this sort of way for me, and makes me consider subconscious levels of development and creativity in media, something I'm a firm believer of. Cliff Bleszinski, director of Gears of War, may have never explicitly said he was inspired by Contra while making the game, but perhaps his brain was at the time, without him realizing. It's one of his favorite games after all. To me, it feels like that perfect evolution. So, even if the people at Easy Trigger Games weren't exactly thinking this, that's fine, because this game sort of speaks for itself in a lot of ways, as the missing link in the evolution between Contra and Gears of War. And speaking further on the game's combat and playability, I think it's an extremely fine title in the modern run-and-gun family. I spoke recently about a mechanic I'd love to see in future run-and-guns, but I understand that for a lot of these games, they're usually designed around what was applied in their controls. While I think I'd have fun if games like Cuphead and Blazing Chrome updated their controls to what I desire, that would probably make the games too easy. They need to be initially designed with that control scheme in mind. What I'm trying to say is, I understand people had gripes about Huntdown not letting you aim your gun like in Contra, but if they suddenly added this mechanic, the enemy confrontations would likely be easy to steamroll, especially certain bosses. If this was initially designed like a Contra or Metal Slug, where enemies are coming from every single direction and consistently attacking you with projectile weapons, then there'd be a problem, but it isn't. This game has a lot more horizontal action going on with its level design and enemy attacks than the more popular run-and-gun games. Huntdown is a great example of game design that can shine through a limited control scheme. I guess it's worth gushing about the presentation as well. They found a perfect balance with the dark, gritty dystopia of 80s action cyberpunk where colors still pop when they need to, but it's not a barf of neon constantly screaming at your face. In other words, this game's cyberpunk world does pay homage to famous films at times, but it doesn't cater to nostalgia blindly. Instead, the folks at Easy Trigger made a world that actually looks lived in. Or at least, previously lived in.
The basic stage setup existed, they knew the themes and they knew the kind of characters that they wanted, but between starting the stage and getting to the boss, I was asked to design what happens. Like, what are the events that occur during the stages? What are like the set pieces? What are the actual scenarios that exist? And then like the little set pieces that happen like when you start a stage, or like you walk in on like a moment where some thug does something stupid and they get a van dropped on their head and stuff like that. So I got to write all that stuff and then essentially come up with the backstory for all these characters. We have a kind of Bible that is the story of the world and the kind of backstory of all the characters that we use as a jumping off point, how they make their decisions and like what would they say in reaction to various things.
Anybody home?
And so that sort of guided all the dialogue and all the like reactions from your like playable characters.
I'll get you for that.
This is going to be a blast.
Damn old trinkets everywhere.
I can't say it enough, this game just feels incredibly dense, where nearly every stage has multiple points where you can simply stop running and admire the attention to detail put in every pixel. Not only is there a ton of stages, but each and every single one has their own dedicated boss with a unique way of fighting you. It's crazy, and to think this isn't everything they wanted to put into the game. According to Adrian, there was a 5th district that they left out, meaning if they gave themselves even more time and such to work on it, there was going to be like 5 more stages and bosses, as if this game doesn't already feel so damn full. So often these days I can't help but notice corners cut in a lot of games, both indie and high budgeted, including some of my favorites. And that's not a crime or anything, but these developers clearly think it is. Every piece of this world, these gangs, these bosses are completely distinct in every way possible. Hell, even the checkpoints in the game have so much character put into them, taking the form of this mobile doctor named Tony.
Checkpoint.
Tony's surgery and repair service standing by.
Nobody would have batted an eye if this was your basic flagpole checkpoint like so many other games, but they even made this part of their world. Amazing.
Gonna be all over. Alright, scram!
They're not cutting corners, they're adding corners. If other run and gun worlds were Rubik's Cubes, this shit is a Rubik's dodecahedron? Do those exist? And speaking more on the gangs and their bosses, not a single dud in the bunch. They're extremely wacky and charming. It's almost a shame their legacy likely ends with this single game, but I can see this universe easily expand into something like a comic book, a regular book. Sky's the limit.
I just need a high five in the face!
Come here, you hound dog!
Oops, did I break something?
I was stunned seeing how unique each one of them were, from their design, to their method of combat, to their distinct voice acting. All of the bosses are very eccentric while boasting clear inspiration.
Show me what you got there.
Give me your best shot, pal. I can take it.
Got something for ya.
Here, catch this! You look all blown up!
They're like the gang leaders in Crackdown, except they're actually endearing and have personality. These guys didn't just stop at blatant stereotype.
Juan El Número Martinez is the eyes and ears of Los Muertos. Martinez puts the gang's ample illegal earnings to especially effective use when threatened. Melissa Fang Yin is Shai Gen's exceptional intelligence director. Rafael Chuco Diaz is a renowned and accomplished car thief, joyrider, and getaway driver. Wang is Pacific City's most prominent yet enigmatic inhabitant. The managing director of Shai Gen is rarely seen or heard. His seemingly boundless capabilities lend credence to speculation that he employs the dark arts to fuel his phenomenal success and to empower his deadly Kowloon guard. Jose Tremendo Guerra uses his failing nightclub on La Mugre's southern island as a front to ply his vile trade.
And of course, all of this is beautifully glazed with amazing sprite work. As someone that's happy to see the indie sphere become a lot less reliant on 8-bit graphics and simplistic sprites these past few years, this is a shining example of such. Huntdown looks like it could have been a crazy good 32-bit hidden gem that was only released in 1996 on something like, I don't know, the fucking Atari Jaguar CD. If I can think of any points of criticism, it's the direct references in the form of secret cameos. I'm not saying you need to hide what you're inspired by, which I guess is what they're literally doing, but I don't know, they're just a little too blatant. Well, if you're able to find them in the first place. It's all neat sprite work, but something about it just feels like it undermines the rest of the game. I'm sure the folks at Easy Trigger want Huntdown to stand on its own, right? Of course, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. These are so quick and part of the devs' labor of love, while the rest of the game is its own realized world.
Thanks. Nice patch, dude.
I might be stupid late to this party, but I wanted to express how much I enjoyed Huntdown. It's fun, it's badass, it's the right amount of gritty, it's visually impressive, it's challenging on hard mode, it's a blast. It might not be an identical successor to Contra, but it's still a really good run and gun game in its own right. And as I get older, as I lay my yearly flowers on Contra's gravestone, I realize this is something I can jam with a lot more than something that's trying a little too hard to imitate that legendary series. Sorry, Blazing Chrome, you're boring. Perhaps Huntdown is becoming the legendary title for some younger gamers out there, which simply sends my heart soaring. Another great thing about Huntdown, I think, is that it captures the essence of being a video game. It's hard to even describe what this means, I just know it when I play it. But for starters, it puts the gameplay first and foremost as the focus in a world that looks and feels very dense. Whether they do that in a sense of scale, or just how much is packed into a single screen, if I want to celebrate anything on my channel, it's new games that proudly wear its medium to the highest degree. And I think Huntdown meets that criteria. If you haven't played it yet, please give it a try. It feels limiting at times, but it's a lot of fun when you get into the flow, and it's even better with a friend. Thanks for watching.
Never underestimate me.
It's super effective.
Sweet reputation.
Big shout out to Adrian Comeau for discussing Huntdown with me and providing me with a Steam code. I'd also like to thank the rest of the people at Easy Trigger for making such a cool game. I'd also like to give a shout out to Mike Metroid and DeathGripSand for being great co-op partners throughout my multiple playthroughs. And big thanks to my patrons, new and old, continuing to support me. And with recent happenings at Twitter, it behooves me to stress that I have other means of social media and communication. Join my Discord if you ever want to get in touch with me and have a chat about virtually anything. I've also got a TikTok which I messed around making some videos, so check it out if you go on there. I'm planning to do a lot of small videos there in the future. There's my personal Instagram, I sometimes post there, but it's usually just stories. I'm also giving Tumblr another shot. I've been having fun following pages and reblogging stuff. I know it's no Twitter replacement, but I'll see how posting my content goes on there. Oh, and Mastodon. Yeah, I got one of those too. And as always, follow me on Twitch as I do my best to stream at least once a week.
させよう。他者を犠牲として生きる。ハントダウンで。